Thank you very much, Professor Gruber, for this wonderful and hearty introduction. It really feels like home, even though the weather outside is not very friendly. Well, but the atmosphere here is, and I have to say that I'm really happy to be here. I'm really happy to be a part of this women's community, and the whole idea of introducing a women's prospect on war and ecocide, I think is great and worth all the applause. That's main reason why I am here. I was asked to contribute, when we were discussing my key speaker's position and how I can contribute to the subject of this illustrious gathering. I did some thinking because the book presentation that it is announced in the program, it sounds a little bit passé after a year, because the German version of this book appeared exactly last October. The first presentation was in Frankfurt, and then I was having my brief book tour over Germany with the Langston book tour. And there were interviews and there were discussions with audiences, with the crowds of German readers who were really very eager then to understand what is going on at the eastern border of the European Union, and all were sharing this sense that it is not just another one of 35 war conflicts taking place on our but something really special, something unique in a way, something hitting at the very core of the Western civilization. But how to describe this, how to put it into a comprehensible narrative, especially a narrative which could have been consumable for a mass culture. Well, that was the problem, and I have to say it still remains the challenge for the intellectuals. So I guess I owe you maybe a very brief explanation, how this book came into being. And then I'll expand on a couple of issues which are very which were covered, in kind of succinct way in the book. So I'll take a liberty to develop them, and then it will be an invitation to the discussion, because I really count on your question and on at least, I don't know, half an hour of free conversation. I think it's a timetable. The audience will approve. Just to put it briefly, for those of you who have read the book and for those of you who have not, I still owe this brief explanation that on February 23, I left my home for Warsaw for a 3-day book presentation, because it happened so that my new Polish book, this Planet Vermouth, Polish version of this Planet Vermouth, appeared according to the meticulous plan of my Polish publisher in Polish bookstores on February 23, 2022, precisely. And February 24 was a designed day of a big reading downtown Warsaw, and on Saturday 26, after some umpteen interviews scheduled for these 3 days, I was supposed to go back home. So that was it. That was this very interesting experiment put by history. You know, when you arrive and you start working, okay, you have your interviews, you have your meetings, a meeting is your, a dinner with your agent and everything, and then early in the morning you get awakened with a very early phone call from home, and it is your husband who tells you it started the bombings. Okay, and the world turns topsy-turvy, and here you are with, of course, immediately attacked with media of the whole Europe, because, okay, that's very good opportunity for media to have something really newsworthy. You happen to have a major Ukrainian writer here at hand, while the way from Ukraine is already blocked. No one knows whether the flights are for the first 2 days. No one knew actually whether the flights were postponed or whether they were cancelled. So until now, I don't know, I keep my return ticket. I still keep my return ticket from Warsaw to Kiev on February 26th. Okay, so here we are having, you know, this woman who has been a kind of voice of her country before, because they have been translated into some, you know, 20 languages before. So, okay, a name more or less familiar to the public when it comes to something bad happening in this country. Media are having, you know, the list of names which are familiar to their public. Okay. So, of course, I was, you know, running all over Europe, starting, you know, European Parliament, Strasbourg, and ending, well, all the platforms with all the mics available, trying to explain what was going on. And in the meantime of these feverish activities, no other activities I just couldn't afford because I left my laptop back home. I mean, just coming for 3 days, why do you need your laptop? You are going to be very busy, so just, you know, just a telephone and the carry-on luggage, you know. So here you are, you know, without your library, without your archive, without anything, just a woman in the air. A woman in the air, and here you receive a request from, via my international agent, a request from the Italian publisher, Einaudi, with whom my agent had been negotiating. The reaction was, yes, we are buying all 3 books of Mrs. Zabuzhko that you were proposing us, but on the condition that she will write a new one. A brief one, kind of a pamphlet, brochure, a book-long essay. Please explain, how they put it, we want Mrs. Zabuzhko to explain to our readership everything about cultural and historical contexts of this war that we have missed since 2014. Okay, whenever I'm retelling this, in different audiences, Ukrainians start laughing. Europeans don't, because they don't see what is the point, what is so funny about this, like a normal request. Quite a reasonable request, explain Europeans what we have missed in cultural and historical contexts, and I was almost hysterical, saying, where should I start? In the 18th century, 17th century, or, well, 10,000, 1,000 years ago, 10 centuries ago, and why since 2014? Because we have to review the history, starting with the collapse of the Berlin Wall with 1989, and this Belle Epoque promised to us by Francis Fukuyama, and this victory, the big victory of the West, and the West, and Europe, the image of a new Europe that is going to show the rest of the world the path to the world without wars and war conflicts. Great idea, wonderful, wonderful utopia. And back in the 90s, we all were enchanted with it. So we have to start with reviewing this Belle Epoque discourse and with rewriting, or at least restructuring, I don't know, the curricula of our universities, in which we still continue preparing the youth for the Fukuyama Belle Epoque too. And while it appears that we still have the unlearned lessons from the 20th century that we have missed so badly, and okay, where do I start if I need to squeeze it all into 120,000 characters? 120,000 characters, and how can I tell the full story if you missed the whole story for the past 3 centuries, so to speak? How should I squeeze in it all in 120,000 characters? The answer of the editor was like, okay, we want something like Timothy Snyder. I said, thank you very much, I'm not Timothy. That was the moment, to recall my philosophical background that allowed us to be more flexible than historian. And in the same time, philosophers have the same advantage as writers do. Philosophers can afford being personal. They can afford analyzing their personal experience and trying to generalize on the basis of some existential conflicts. Okay, that's what actually appealed to me most in my students here. This formula by Albert Camus, who said, if you want to be a philosopher, write a novel. It's the most philosophical genre, in the very essence of the word. Nothing more philosophical than the European novel, in terms of the collision, the drama of ideas and everything. So of course, I said, yes, it's going to be personal. Yes, it's going to be based on my personal experience, on what I have understood, or I think I have understood about the world we are living in for the past 30 years, as a witness contemplating this historical reality, and as a participant living inside this historical reality. Sounds, I would say, very Marxist. Because you are you are explaining, you are trying to explain things, and at the same time you are participating in transforming things. And yes, all this is in a book. Yes, it is a book. It turned out to be a book both about Ukraine and Russia, but in the same time it is a book about the West. And for me, I have to confess now, for me, it has been the book about the West from the very beginning, not only because it's addressed, meant for the Western audience, but because my own question that's been pushing me through this 120,000 characters, and I did make it 128,000, okay, characters, squeezing things into all these convoluted sentences with complicated complex syntax and everything. There is a special term in Ukrainian criticism, Zabuzhko sentence. The one that starts on one page and then ends somewhere 2 or 3 pages after with digressions. I admire digressions. And with brackets and with all those, different layers of thought squeezed into one sentence. So I did manage, to squeeze in 2 stories. One of them 30 years long. That is the one that is still lasting. This story of the failed subversion of Ukraine, which initially was designed by Kremlin to take place back in the 90s, unnoticeably and quietly, because they were seeing the collapse of the Soviet Union as just the side effect of perestroika. It was shock, the fact that all these former Soviet republics, all these Russian provinces, as we had been seen for at least in the post-war, World War II period, appeared to be real things with their own to self-determination. That was something that completely took Kremlin and the West. And that's been, I would say, in a way, the turning point of the story. No one was prepared to see Russia collapsing. No one wanted Russia collapsing. No one still wants Russia collapsing. And this probably helps, this may serve, as a key to understanding how come, the major question I reiterate, which was pushing me through all those 28,000 characters. How come that the contemporary European thought that the best Western intellectuals, with but few exceptions that were not in the mainstream and were not taken seriously, had completely overlooked 30 years, or at least a full quarter, of the rise of the new dictatorship, this time in the northeast of Europe, just along the same patterns as European elites did back in the 1930s, in the interwar period. It's been absolutely the same path, the same route, the same story, as if there were no precedents to recognize and to ask ourselves, hey, what are we doing? The same attempts to pacify the aggressor, the same language used. I mean, unfortunately, I don't have. It would have called, for the whole course of lectures, to dwell upon the language which was used in 2008 with Georgian conflict, which was not really a conflict, which was an ostentatious attack upon an aggression against the independent country, and the Western political elites pretended that nothing special happened, that was some conflict that got frozen due to negotiations and blah, blah, and so on and so forth. And those words that were pronounced then in Kiev, like, yeah, we are the next. We are the next because this is the end of Yalta. This is the end of the international order, the demonstrative, blatant, arrogant finale of the international law established after 1945. And pretending that, okay, if we give him what he wants, okay, he will be happy and will be able to sleep, to have a good solid sleep in the night. Here I quote. I have to control myself, because once I start, getting to my favorite subjects, okay, I have to censor, okay, to cross out the juicy parts, on the way, just trying to summarize, to keep along the major lines. But yes, these were the discussions in the British press from winter 2022. In January of 2022, I was asked to join the discussion in which one very respectable British media, was inviting the... No, I'm fine, thank you. No, I'm fine. Apart from that, I caught a cold in Frankfurt, I'm fine. Yeah, no, I'm fine. I'm fine, thank you. Mm-hmm. Can I be here normally? Yeah? Uh-huh. Okay, so... yeah, and I was invited to join the discussion focused upon an issue: how actually Ukraine should groom its constitution so that Putin were not nervous. Like, of course, Ukraine should get a neutral status, like Finland or Austria, for it is absolutely understandable that Putin would not be happy to have NATO missiles in his backyard. Please note this backyard. Okay, that was about this Rhine area in 1936. That's how it was used, when Hitler made this annexation, and French press was using this after all. He returned to his backyard.
Hitler returned to his backyard. And here in January 2022, the independent British media with a very high reputation claims that my whole country is Putin's backyard. And of course, Putin doesn't want the NATO missiles in his backyard. And the examples like this, I give some of them also in the book, but the examples like this, the examples of how language, how the old language from the 30s, the language of pacifying the aggressor, has been restored, came back into action, and has been flourishing. There was no other language in preparation. There were no other words that most of Western journalists, media people, could use to describe what happened on February 24. They were still using, we mentioned this yesterday, they were still using this Ukraine's conflict for a couple of weeks, months. For a couple of months, there still was Ukraine's conflict. That was, I'll never forget that, because for me it was precisely this period of jumping, from one stand to another, from one parliament to another, and saying, when you have the invasion of 200,000 army upon your territory, you don't call it crisis. This is not crisis. On September 1, 1939, it was not Polish crisis. It was German aggression against Poland. Because everything starts in the language. Yes, everything starts with naming or misnaming things properly or improperly, and the mechanism, how this war had been in preparation in media and education for decades before it came out. I try to show in the book, of course, briefly, 120,000 characters. Don't forget. Yeah, everything is concise. Everything is pressed in and squeezed in. So, I mean, if you give more breath into this text, this could have been, quite a solid book, I would say, maybe 300 or 400 pages long. But anyway, I've done my job, yeah. So, so how come that's a true intellectual challenge? How come that, Putin did not fall out of the blue? And yes, February 24, it was not the result of Putin getting mad, and it was discussed by experts on media in many European countries. The easiest explanation, this man is crazy, and the question was how long this is going to last, because it's obviously that it is madness. Yeah, was Nazism a madness? Was not Bolshevism a madness? We have behind us the whole century of mass madnesses. And I don't even touch, what was going on in China and Japan and in all those parts of the world whose languages I don't master and can get a word of their direct voices. So it's just always second-hand information. But, what kind of explanation it is in 2022? Okay, that's madness, so it cannot last long. What have we learned about evil? from the 20th century. What about all this never again? What about all these, volumes and volumes, libraries of studies of Nazism, of Holocaust, of the history of genocides and everything? What good did it make to all of us as species, as human species? What good did it make us if it does not help us a bit to recognize exactly the same historical situation repeating itself, okay, in new decorations? Yes. But there must be something very wrong with the very optics of the European culture. And by European culture, I don't mean the culture of European Union, of course, you understand, yeah. My culture is also European, and I do analyze, this Ukrainian I do analyze how Ukrainians were trying somehow to work with this big historical challenge for the past 30 years. And yes, it's so it just happened to be so that that we were the first in this clash of civilization that was, I'm not using this term, and I am not even buying this like a theory. I don't think that Huntington may be here any better explanation, may serve us with any better explanations than Fukuyama or whoever else, of the prophets of this Belle Époque too, yeah. Still, the past year, which I spent with this book, traveling, touring with this book all over Europe, because it's been translated into some eight or nine already languages through this year. And every time, of course, every time there are new invitations and new discussions, and this book proved to be a very good pretext, very good reason, very good, I don't know, at least a kind of a provocation, to cause some discussions within every society where it was translated. So I would say after this year of scanning, I can summarize with I would say more confidence what a year ago were, guesses, hypotheses, something which was good for the essay, but maybe not that good for the university audience. So I clearly see two major problems. And the first of them I've already kind of mentioned. That's Western blindness to Russian imperialism. Russia was never diagnosed as an empire, as an imperialistic state. all the crimes against humanity and horrible atrocities that were perpetrated in that part of the world back in the 20th century were ascribed to communism. So they are associated with communism, not with imperialism. The fact that there is a continuation in repressions, in the target and even manner of repressions between the old Tsarist Russia, which did not collapse back in 1917 just for nothing. I mean, there were pretty good reasons this empire was hateful, and it did not stand the challenges of history presented by World War One. Yeah. But the fact that the Soviet Union was turned to be after this brief, I would say, I call it our Red Weimar period of the 20s before Stalin came to power, was transformed again into empire. With all the genocidal politics continuing, with this continuity of genocidal politics toward ethnic minorities, and that lasted until the late 80s. Well, that was actually never an issue to discuss. In this perestroika time, when for the first time the Soviet people discovered something like free press, the press that all of a sudden became interesting, the first calculations appeared, which now I failed to find the traces of the calculations, how many ethnic minorities disappeared completely, became extinct in the 70 years of the Soviet rule. Over 100. Over 100 nationalities, national groups, traditions, tribes, whatever, you name it. But the variety of the world on that territory got shrinked so dramatically that only the victims themselves, can witness, but victims don't have the voice of their own. And yes, again, we all remember how 3 weeks before Ukraine's declaration of independence, George Bush Sr. Arrived to Kiev to warn us against any separatist inspiration and suicidal nationalism. His famous Kiev chicken speech. There were crowds of hundreds of thousands in the street cheering independence, незалежність. Well, and he in Verkhovna Rada of the then communist Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic was teaching our parliamentarians already elected, not in quite fake elections like they used to be in the previous decades of the Soviet power. We're teaching them to learn democracy from Moscow. because Gorbachev is there and he is a trustful guy, and and Russia is coming through the big democratic transformations. So of course all these troublesome provinces with unpronounceable names, of course they all should stick together, and they all should follow the path shown from Moscow. 3 weeks before the famous coup and Ukraine's declaration of independence. But more than once it is forgotten that the West also had swallowed the first Chechen war. Because once the Soviet Union started to collapse, the empire started to collapse for the second time in the century, started to collapse, the first 1917, the second 1991. Again, so after this Union Republic, this chain-like self-dismemberment was going on. And Chechnya is the first subject of Russian Federation claimed its independence. And then Tatarstan was the second in 1992, but that was already too much, for the for the international political elite, and the process had to be somehow halted on the so that they could have a solid sleep in the night. The process had to be halted on the borders of the Russian Federation, and that's how, in fact, Russia got a free hand in both Chechen wars. In the first one and in the second one already in the 21st century. And that's how Chechnya became a playground for elaborating, for developing the new war technique that they now apply in Ukraine, previously in Syria too, namely state terrorist warfare. All this completely overlooked. Now, it didn't start on February 24. At least 2 Chechen wars, one in the 90s under Yeltsin, one in 21st century already with under Putin. At least 2 Chechen wars, were providing enough material to do some thinking that there is something wrong with this country allegedly taking a path of democratic transformation. Why? Well, and here we get a hello from old Hegel. And it turns out that yes, we all still live, by we I mean intellectuals, because it's us who produce narrations, it's us who produce discourse on professional terms. So we are still trapped within, subconsciously, but still trapped within this old Hegelian paradigm of Europe being split into historical and non-historical nations. Historical meaning those who were successful enough to have empire in the age of enlightenment, enlightened monarchy. Great, terrific. That's Europe which we love. That's our standard of Europe, enlightened monarchy. Yeah? And yes, some faraway overseas colonies, they also, help to get more enlightenment. Yes, because education and culture is a leisure which should be paid somehow with a certain development, with a certain level of economy. And those who did not, those who failed to have the empires of their own, and here we are, approaching this really touchy spot. Oh goodness, it's already 1 hour. Okay. Okay. To an end, yeah. Okay. I mean, I'm just. It's been like warming up. The most interesting part, is just. It's just to follow, about to follow. Well, okay. Half an hour. Half an hour, 20 minutes. Okay, 20 minutes. I'll try to make it 20 minutes. Okay. Cutting off all the examples and quotations and everything. Okay, just okay. But the fact is that what appeared through this past 19 months of this new war, no one knows how to describe this, Russian aggression in Ukraine. It appeared that not only the voice of Ukraine became heard for the first time, I would say the voice of Eastern and Central Europe became heard. The division which had been kept in our mind, which had been preserved in our education, and which somehow is taciturn, always between the line, always here between the line. This division along the former Berlin Wall into the Western Europe, a proper one, and Eastern Europe, these new democracies which need to learn how to build a proper democracy, and we, the old democracies, have to have this patronizing attitude toward them. I've heard this from Lithuanian member of European Parliament. She was obviously very deeply offended with this conversation with her French colleague a couple of years ago, when she, as well as her other Baltic colleagues in European Parliament, were trying to convince their Western counterparts against the possible risks or threats connected with the Nord Stream, as well as against this whole theory of Wandel zum Handel with Russia, and that you have to be very cautious with any business proposals with Russia, and so on and so forth. So she got this patronizing and, in fact, extremely offensive answer from his French colleague, who said, "Madam, the Soviet Union collapsed 30 years ago. You have phantom pains." So I know more or less how many times political, intellectual, cultural, media elites from these new democracies, these poor relatives who were let in the European house or were not, that's about Ukraine, okay. How many times, how much efforts they spent on trying to warn the West, and how ignored they were just because they were not taken seriously. With this whole, again, a little bit about the language, I simply can't omit that until the invasion, until February 24, there was this term in usage concerning Ukraine, the former Soviet Republic. Ukraine, former Soviet Republic, ex-Soviet Republic, just allegedly to mark the geographical position, but it is not about geographical position alone. So finally, on some of these big literary events, I said, it was in Germany that I said, I'm sorry, but it worked. That was the first time that I understood that, yes, it worked. I was understood. I said, that it sounds more or less like if I was saying Germany, the former Third Reich. Like, what is wrong about that? Yeah, it is part of your political history, right? Well, but how does it sound to your ear? Yes, Ukraine does have this 70 years of being a Soviet republic in our political history. But we are having other, other forms of state on that territory in the modern period. We were having Ukrainian People's Republic in 1918, 1920. Most importantly, we were having the so-called Hetmanate, this early modern state which was under Moscow protectorate through the 18th century. And of course, Moscow is not London, so Ukraine was not Canada. Canada is, no one remembers that Canada is still British protectorate. So this, in our case, it did not work that well, but it is precisely due to these traditions, to the political traditions of the Hetmanate of the 18th century, that both the Ukrainian People's Republic was possible, and all these aspirations and all this fight for independence, century long lasting, and yes, we have this boisterous political history, not only as part of different empires, of which we also, of course, borrowed many things. But you can't just, describe Ukraine as the former Soviet Republic. And until now, and only after I said that, there was this young Dutch student in the audience who said, thank you very much. It occurred to me only now that we still use the term Eastern Bloc. The girl born in 2001. The term Eastern Bloc is still in her textbooks. So don't tell me Hegel is dead. Don't tell me the Berlin Wall is over. Once it is in the heads. And yes, it is this better West and worse East. So whatever they say, they just don't know their business. You have phantom pains. Madam, Soviet Union collapsed 30 years ago. The aggression changed the balance, I would say, of optics. It gave Eastern elites more confidence. We started to be heard. And our Western counterparts recognized that, yes, they did miss something we were trying to tell them. We were trying to tell them, yes. There are lots of proofs, there are books which were or were not translated, some were not, which were marginalized or, well, anyway. But still we were having the story of our own. And this guy, That's again one of my favorite examples. Though I promised to cross the examples of the Latvian film director Edvard Snorre, who made a very good documentary some 10 years ago. No, it was before 2014, so more than 10 years ago, The Soviet Story. A very good coverage, of this eastern phase of the 20th century totalitarianism, and putting it into context and as a counterpart of Nazism. So lots of facts unknown, lots of historical facts unknown to the Western audience, but the reviews were like, yeah, okay, until one of the American reviewers dropped the sentence which I think can serve as an epigraph of how the West, these historical nations, successful historical nations, the Golden Club, were, watching, were seeing us, those non-historical ones. Okay, film, but it is unclear why should we care? Why should we care? The Soviet story, okay, some saying like, why should we care? So February 24 came as an answer, why should you have cared? Yeah. And this really makes us change the optics. Okay, 15 minutes. This really makes us change the optics when you go back. I'm not going to dwell on this last 30 years. It is in my book, it is like, I would say, kind of Graham Greene-like story. But I guess I did manage to grope the matrix, so to speak, which serves as a reasonable explanation for many allegedly unexplainable things that were happening in these past 30 years in this East, in the territory of this East. But when I'm speaking of changing the optics, I mean getting back further to 3 centuries ago, to the early modern period, and here I have to make this remark. It's very interesting actually to use, I think, even in your classes. I once came on YouTube. I once came across a very interesting video, 5 minutes film, history of Europe, 1,000 years in 5 minutes. And it's an absolutely exciting view. How the states were appearing and disappearing, how they were overlapping, how they were growing, how they were like breathing, this continent like a living entity, breathing until it calms down more or less in the past 3 centuries, with 2 important exceptions that were blinking all the times, like pulses. Where is the pulse of Europe? Okay, the first one you of course know. Yeah, between France and Germany. Yeah, between France and Germany, all the time, there is something is happening, something is blinking, changing. You can see this, France and how it moves. Yeah. and comes down where more or less like a century ago, yeah? On the verge of the past century. While another one is a permanent beacon pulsing all the time between Poland and Ukraine. That's I would say, one of the living organs of Europe, which had been severely ignored for too long a time. Because it's only via the prism of this struggle, Polish-Ukrainian struggle, to build, each one wanted to build an empire of her own. Okay, Poland failed, Ukraine failed, but goodness, I mean, how much blood was spilled in the meantime. And when now everyone says that yes, you have this long historical relations with Russia, let's not forget that with Russia we were having 3 centuries of relations. With Poland we were having 6 centuries of extremely close relations, of bloody feuds, of brotherly love and brotherly hatred. Well, that's been really, really important for the destinies of Europe, because were it not for the Jesuit expansion, were it not for the short-sightedness of the Warsaw elites, which did not want to recognize the Russanian, old Ukrainian elites of the time as their equals, until them, our forefathers, were agreed to Polonize, to get Polonized. Agreed to Polonization. So were it not for these really dumb policies, we would have had totally different, borders and different commonwealths. And in all likeliness, no Russia. Because Russia was created as an empire, as a European empire, by our forefathers. Yes, it is the brainchild of Kiev Baroque philosophers. Teofan Prokopovich has been the ideologist of Peter I, whom he taught how to be this enlightened monarch. And Putin, who today, all these idiotic speeches, that Putin is now pouring upon humanity in the 21st century. Okay, that's just copy-paste from the 17th century Ukrainian thinkers. The legitimization of the empire. We go to Constantinople, because Ukraine was fighting then on 2 fronts. There was Ottoman Empire on the south, and our forefathers wanted free access to the Black Sea coast, safe Black Sea coast. And yes, our forefathers wanted the Jesuit expansion out of their territories back to Poland, and that's how the Khmelnytsky rebellion started and quickly turned into the typical religious-like but national bourgeois revolution of the 17th century. That was the time of the religious wars. Yeah. So this whole idea that we are making this, Orthodox empire, were fighting both Catholics from the West and the Turks, the Muslims from the south. Our aim is Constantinople. This is all in Innocenti Gisel, 1674, yeah. This all has been, made up in Kiev. And yes, here we are, the core. We are the second Jerusalem. Kiev is the second Jerusalem. Yeah, after the fall of Constantinople, Kiev still remains the center of the capital of Eastern Christianity. So yeah, here we are. And this great Russia, like Magna Graecia, Mehala Elas. By the way, this whole Russian world, this term that Putin uses, yes, it is Kosmos Hellenikos. It is also from the Greek sources that Giselle Prokopovich and others were so favorite of. I mean, you can't understand without studying the Ukrainian Baroque thought of the 16th, 17th century. You won't be able to understand, how our forefathers imposed them. Our church education and all these missions to the north, all these monasteries and libraries and all this education that was all made with the hands of Ukrainian when the first university, proper Russian university, appeared, was opened in the late 18th century. Not only professors, but 2/3 of students came from Kiev, from Kiev Mohyla Academy, because proper Russians, did not yet know why to study. What is the point? There were no universities there. So these 2 centuries of this, big cultural expansion of Kiev to Moscow, Gogol was the last one. And Gogol's ambition to create a new language, a new literary language, which will unite little Russians and great Russians. Well, that was very outdated already in the 19th century, but still that's from this pre-modern period when our elites wanted to have the Orthodox Empire supported by somebody else's military power. That was the project, this Khmelnytsky project, that is now coming to an end. And that what made Russian Empire out of Muscovy, out of the Tsardom of Muscovy. Even the name was changed from Muscovy to Russia. And that's what provided to Russia its European face, so to speak. That's how through the 18th century, Russia got this European face, Slavic, Orthodox, but European. And that is something that's desperately missing in all these, Russo-centric textbooks in history, which are provided by the Slavic studies in the West. Because until now they start Russian history in Kiev in the 18th century with the baptizing of Kiev and the fact that that Russia is in fact as young empire as the United States, and that yes, it was created in this pre-modern version, still in the time of the religious wars, and that it was never, ever modernized, because every attempt of modernization started collapse process. be it in the 19th century or 20th century or whatever. So the naivety of the contemporary, the naivety of this, American leader who says that now they are going to support Russian people in their inspirations for democracy and human rights. I mean, they have no idea yet what democracy and human rights is, because they were never having civil society. There is absolutely no concept of citizenship. They were not having their version of the French Revolution, so to speak, liberté, égalité, fraternité. So, and yes, that's the difference in political traditions. You have to pay for having this empire, this absolutely immovable structure, this grand patchwork, embracing tens and tens of half-extinct already, peoples, nations, tribes, whatever. The only way to keep them all together is what? Vertikal власти, as they call it. The vertical, the axis of power, the hierarchy, this vertical hierarchy, nothing horizontal. No horizontal ties within society, just hierarchy and subordination. So, army and prison. Well, these are really, two very important phases of proper Russian culture, which should have been studied thoroughly, eagerly, and with full understanding that it is not about the past. It is now, even though it is extremely archaic, yes, it's very archaic, empire based on resource looting, that explains its ecological inadequacy. I wanted to dwell upon that, but goodness, it will take me another hour. Okay.